In the shadowed corridors of history, a dark and sinister tale unfolds. A tale that could have been ripped from the pages of a modern-day thriller. Imagine a world where religious leaders, instead of being paragons of virtue, were steeped in sin, where the sacred became profane, and the moral fabric of society was torn to shreds. This is not a fictional world, but the stark reality of the Catholic Church in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, a period that witnessed the Church's moral decay and the seeds of the Reformation being sown. Picture this: a clergy that was supposed to guide the faithful was, in fact, leading them astray. Priests who were sworn to a life of celibacy found it impossible to keep their vows. In London, women entering the confessional box were sometimes offered absolution in exchange for sexual favors. In Norfolk and other parts of England, priests made up a shockingly high percentage of those accused of sex crimes, far disproportionate to their numbers in the general population. Some priests took mistresses, and in Germany, it was almost the norm for priests to live with women. The Roman clergy, in particular, had a reputation for promiscuity, but this was not a problem confined to Rome. It was widespread across the Italian peninsula. The monasteries, which were supposed to be bastions of spiritual discipline, were no better. Many were in a state of disarray, with monks living lives of luxury and indulgence. In France, the lack of discipline and the immoderate lifestyle of the monks had become so scandalous that even kings and princes lost respect for the religious orders. The situation in the convents was equally dire. In England, several nunneries were shut down due to the dissolute disposition of the nuns. Some had even borne children fathered by priests, and there were accounts of prioresses and abbesses living in open adultery. The papacy, the very head of the church, did little to stem this tide of moral decay. Popes like Alexander VI and Leo X were more concerned with worldly power and wealth than with the spiritual well-being of their flock. Alexander VI, for instance, was known for his lavish lifestyle and his patronage of the arts, but his papacy was also marked by corruption and nepotism. His son, Cesare Borgia, was a notorious figure, a ruthless politician who was more interested in expanding his family's power than in the teachings of Christ. Leo X, while a patron of the arts and a man of culture, was also a master of the art of making money. He created a vast network of offices and positions within the church, which he sold to the highest bidder, enriching himself and the curia in the process. The traffic in indulgences was perhaps the most egregious example of the church's commercialization. Indulgences, which were supposed to be a way for the faithful to atone for their sins, became a tool for the church to raise funds. Pardoners or indulgence mongers roamed the countryside, selling these sacred documents for a price. They promised absolution from all sins, no matter how grave, for a few pennies or even a pint of beer. This practice not only turned the church into a money machine, but also deeply offended the pious, who saw it as a blatant form of corruption. The financial burden of the church's avarice fell heavily on the poor. The Catholic hierarchy was said to own a majority of the wealth in France and Germany, and the taxes and fees imposed by the church left many struggling to make ends meet. The gap between the rich and the poor, already wide, was further widened by the church's greed. It was a time when the faithful city, as John Colet, dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, put it, had become a harlot, and the church's practices were so far removed from its founding principles that many believed its ruin or chastisement was near. The moral decay of the church was not just a matter of individual failings, but a systemic problem. The clergy's behavior was a reflection of the leadership at the top. Popes and cardinals set the tone, and when they lived lives of luxury and indulgence, it was only natural that the lower ranks would follow suit. The result was a church that had lost its way, a church that was more concerned with power and wealth than with the spiritual salvation of its followers. The corruption and moral decay of the church in the late 15th and early 16th centuries had far-reaching consequences. It led to a loss of faith among the laity, who could no longer look to the clergy for moral guidance. It also set the stage for the Reformation, a movement that sought to return the church to its original principles and to root out the corruption that had taken hold. Reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin emerged, calling for a return to the teachings of the Bible and a rejection of the church's corrupt practices. The story of the church's moral decay is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of accountability. It is a story that continues to resonate today, as institutions of all kinds grapple with issues of ethics and integrity. The Church's journey from a beacon of light to a symbol of moral decay is a stark reminder that even the most sacred of institutions can fall from grace, and that the road to reform is often long and difficult. In the end, the Church's moral decay was a wake-up call, a call that was answered by those who dared to challenge the status quo and to fight for a return to the true spirit of Christianity. The legacy of this dark period in history is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of faith, even in the face of great adversity.